All right, let's go get started. So, thank you guys for being flexible about Monday. So we will meet on Friday this week, and we won't have any kind of reflection essay or anything like that. Hopefully, you guys took that extra time to study and take the exam. I went ahead and put a 5-point curve on exam 1. So that's already in your reflected on CSC Online when you look at that cumulative exam 1 score there. So what are we going to get up to today? Well, we're going to be really talking about all these, the different types of price levels. So we end up talking about the consumer price index. And how is it constructed? And then, what is it good for, right? So how is it used? Second, we're going to talk about how we use that CPI right, which is this consumer price index, right, CPI. So how do we actually use this CPI to adjust the dollar amounts so as to eliminate the effects of inflation? We're going to define what that inflation is as well here. We are going to talk about, there's a couple of really important biases. When we talk about CPI, the CPI calculation. And then lastly, for today at least, we're going to go ahead and distinguish and talk about the relative price changes. So how is inflation and relative price changes how are they different? And then essentially, how can we talk about what's the true costs of inflation? Today is just inflation. So we'll get to what the heck I'm talking about there in a second. Inflation is really just talking about an increase in the price level, right? But what is that price level? Well, let's go ahead and talk about that. So measuring the price level. Up. Turn it off. It goes up. Measuring price level. There should be like a button here so that now there's like measuring that price level. Okay. So we are going to be using something called the Consumer Price Index. Right? And this is just something that measures the different costs of living at different times. And so, you know, there's going to be something that we call a basket of goods, a standard basket of goods and services. And essentially they try to keep this the same. And so then we have a measure that's, you know, just of the relative costs of the same basket of goods and services. So for the most part, for right now, kind of in the era that we're living in, right? You know, so this video is being made in 2020, right? And so 2010 is the base year. For this CPI. You know, if we were taking this class in 2008, or even maybe in like 2012, the base year would probably be 2000, right? So it's usually done on these decades, right? Every 10 years or so. These base years change periodically. Remember, a triangle like that is just a delta, just means change, right? So very, very, very simple calculation here, right? If we had, let's talk about 2010, and then we'll talk about 2015, right? And so if we have something like rent, hamburgers, movie tickets, hamburgers, movie tickets, and then we end up with a total monthly expenditure. Right? For each one of them. So in 2010, we end up getting a rent of $750. The hamburgers, these are going to be 60 hamburgers. So in 2010, those hamburgers are $2 each. So what does that mean? 60 times 2 means $120. I'm spending a month on hamburgers. Those movie tickets, again, we got to say how many movie tickets? 10 movie tickets. And those are assumed in 2010 to be $6 each. So that's going to be what? 6 times 10 is $60. We add all that stuff up, we end up with $940. Now let's talk about 2015. So in 2015, rent's gone up. It's now $945. The hamburgers are now $2.50 each. So that extra 50 cents, right? The extra 0.5 times 60 is 30. So that's going to be 150 instead of 120. The movie tickets are no longer $6 each. Those have gone up $1. They're now $7 each. So we end up with a $70 monthly expenditure on movie tickets. We add all this stuff up. We end up with a total monthly expenditure in 2015 of $1,175. when we calculate the CPI, right, we're using this 2010 as our base year, right? So that means that when I'm doing that CPI calculation, that's going to be my new price level minus my old price level all over the old or the base year price level. So I'm saying price level, but you know, we could all, I mean, it's kind of interchangeable with baskets, right? The level or basket, it's really talking about the same thing. The price level is talking about kind of how the levels change for all of the different goods. The basket is more specific to the goods that people buy, you know, in monthly day-to-day life. So to calculate this, it would just be, okay, well, actually, apologies. Mistake. Our CPI is nothing more than the new price level over the base year price level. So we'll just say it's the new year, and we'll even, let's just correct this and just say basket price. So that's what it is. Over the base year basket price. So we're not looking at the percentage change. We're actually just looking at the ratio, right? We're looking at how much more is the new year basket price compared to the old year basket price. And so we're going to go ahead and put the new year basket price on the top, the old year basket price at the bottom. We end up with 1175 divided by 940, which gives us 1.25. So this would be the CPI for 2015 with a base of 2010. What's that telling me? That's telling me that everything in 2015 was like 25% more expensive than it was in 2010. So if we wanted to figure out what's the CPI for 2010, right, given a base of 2010, what would that be? Well, that would be, we would just take that 940, put it on the numerator and on the denominator. That's the price level in the year that we're looking at. And it's also the price level on the base. So the CPI of the year that it's based in is always 1 by definition. So if you're ever having a hard time figuring out when you're looking at a kind of a series of CPIs, what's the base? Figure out which year is labeled 1. That's going to tell you what they're referring to. Now, the BEA, right? So the Bureau of Economic Analysis, they're the ones that publish this, right? And they end up publishing it as a percentage. So you take this and you just multiply it by 100, right? So a price index, so kind of talking about a new thing here, right? A price index, that measures the average price of a given quality of goods and services relative to the same price of goods and services in some base year. So CPI is one type of price index. And what is the CPI doing? The CPI is measuring the changes in consumer prices. There's a PPI, right, that measures the changes in the producers, right, the producer price index. There's also an import export price index for all the international trade that happens, right? Okay, so now that we got that out of the way, go ahead and talk about the beast in the room, inflation. What is this thing, inflation, right? And so this thing, inflation, is nothing more than the annual percent change in that price level. And so, you know, when we're talking about, so if we take a look at a little chart here. And the CPI in 2012, right, base, this is probably 2000, honestly, because it's going all the way back to, I think the CPI there is 2.3. CPI in 2013 is 2.33. 2014 is 2.37. 2015 is 2.37, right? So how do we calculate these inflations from these CPIs, right? Here's where we're going to go with the new minus old over old, right? So the inflation for 2013 is going to be the CPI for 2013 minus the CPI in 2012 divided by the CPI in 2012, right? This is our normal new minus old over old formula, right? When we did, you know, algebra and stuff like that. Now we just have specific values, right? The CPI 2012 and 2013, which is 2.33 and 2.3. So plugging those values in, we end up with 0.03 over 2.3, and we end up with 0.0139. But then remember, where this is a percentage change, right? So we're going to go ahead and we're going to multiply this by 100, and we're going to end up with 1.39% as our final answer there. That's our CPI. Sorry, that's our inflation rate. For 2013.
So, new minus all over base is fine. Inflation.
That's how you define inflation. Yep, exactly. Whereas the CPI is a ratio. The inflation is a rate of change. It's telling you what's going on. Yeah, it's just telling you the growth, whereas the other one is telling you how big one is compared to the other. Just pure definitions between like percentages. And so we see that, during this period, right? So this was a period where, we were really trying to get out of the Great Recession, right? And so there wasn't a lot of growth in terms of the prices. So we ended up with getting some inflation here that was 1.3%. We got inflation here that was 1.7%. And then look, we actually got 0% inflation between 2014 and 2015. Right? Now, this isn't ideal, right? Normally, we want something that's closer to, like between 2 and 3%. It really just depends on who you're asking. Some people say 2 to 5. It's kind of a big debate right now. But what you really don't want is you really don't want a deflation, right? So what ended up happening in the Great Depression, right, which was when there was 25% unemployment. It was back before the federal government really kind of did anything to help out in terms of jobs programs and in terms of social safety nets and just Social Security and Medicaid and all that kind of stuff, right? This was before all that stuff, and we ended up having a really nasty fall in the price level. The price level here started out as 0.171, and then as it continued going further in time, right? We're progressing in time. The price level should increase like it did ahead, right? It should increase or at least not change it as much, but we actually see a decrease in it, right? It goes to 0.167, 0.152, 0.137, and 0.130. So doing that same kind of calculation, right? We get 0.167 minus 0.171. That's going to be a negative number on the top, divided by 0.171. And then we times that whole thing by 100. That's going to end up giving me a negative 2.3%. And so we see that the 1930s, the beginning at least, was a period of deflation, right? Where every year the price level was getting lower and lower and lower and lower. So when it's negative, when inflation is negative, it's called deflation. So one of the things that we don't want to get tricked with is the fact that we get paid in nominal dollars, right? Our paychecks are we get paid so many hundreds or thousands of dollars, right? And that's a nominal quality, right? So a nominal quantity, it's a nominal quantity, is measured in the current dollar values, right? Whereas what's a more useful measure is actually a real quantity. And I hate the fact that they chose real to use, right? They could have made up something else. Like nominal is like, oh yeah, I'm not used to seeing that word before, right? And then they go real. You could have chosen vominal or like any kind of other thing, right? But it's just saying that the reason why they said real is because it's more useful. So to economists, that's like, oh, well, this one's real. The other one's, yes, right? But That's all. So don't let that kind of, I mean, the other reason is because it's trying to capture, right? It's a measurement in physical terms. And so the real quantity, right? This is capturing, you know, how many hamburgers, movie tickets, etc. can I buy? Right? That's what the real thing is really we're trying to get at, and the real does a better job of capturing that, right? So the kind of, you know, the rule that we have here is that when comparing over time, stick to the real quantities, okay? Use real quantities. These are also going to be known as adjusted for inflation. So how do we get these real quantities? Well, we do a process called we deflate how the heck do we do this thing called deflating? Well, we're going to divide that nominal quantity by the price index, right? So most of the time, for us, it's going to be that CPI. So we don't want to get, you know, tricked by, you know, saying, oh, well, I've been working at this place for 5 years. And they've given me a $4,000 raise. My life's so much better off. Well, that is it. Because when we take a look at the CPI in 2010 was 1.00, the CPI in 2015 was 1.25. So how would we go ahead and calculate that real income? So we're told we divide it by the CPI, right? So the first one, it's pretty easy. It's going to be 40,000 divided by 1. It's going to be 40,000. Awesome. What about the second one? That's going to be 44,000 divided by 1.25. That's going to give me 35,200 bucks. So in real terms, I've actually lost money, right? Why have I lost money? Because I can buy less stuff. Yes, my wages have increased, but the price of movie tickets have increased. The price of hamburgers have increased. Rent's increased, right? And so we have to keep in mind that the price level increasing, you know, is quite a dampener to any kind of nominal pay increase that we get, right? So, you know, we can do, if we wanted to do kind of longer term comparisons, right? we're definitely going to want to, use the real amount instead of the nominal amount, right? So, if we talk about, Babe Ruth's salary, right? Famous baseball player Babe Ruth's salary compared to, a current famous baseball player, Clayton Kershaw. So, this was 1930 that Babe Ruth was, hitting his homers and stuff, right? And, Clayton, the salary data we have is from 2017. We've got some info on their nominal salary here, right? So nominal salary. So Babe Ruth back in 1930, he made $80,000. Like, wait, what? That's not that much. Clayton Kershaw in 2017 made $33,800,000. Probably more what you expected with sports people, right? But what do we care about at the end of the day, right? We care about the real salary, right? The real salary is going to actually tell me how those two individuals lived, right? The standard of living, the amount of actual stuff that they could buy with that money. And so how do I get to the real salary? Well, I skipped a column there, right? I need a column. It's over there, but we're going to put it over here for right now, of CPI, right? The CPI in 1930 was 0.167. And in 2017, it was 2.45. So how are we going to get the real salary? Well, we're just going to go ahead and we're going to take 80,000. We're going to divide that by 0.167. And we're going to take 33,800,000. We're going to divide that by 2.45. And so we end up with Babe Ruth's salary, real salary, being about $500,000. And a modern baseball player's salary, even when we're accounting for the increase in inflation and stuff, is still a lot more than Babe Ruth's, right? It's going to be 13,795,918. So the gap is still there, just not as much. Now this person's only making 26 times the amount of Babe Ruth instead of hundreds, right? Hundreds and hundreds, 500 to 1,000 times. So, the other thing that we need to keep in mind throughout this whole thing is that, we're so keen on, I guess it should be something like that. We're so keen on tracking what the average wages for workers, right? The median wage or whatever the case may be. So this is production workers' wages. So this is, the hourly rate they're getting paid. We started on 1970. And we end up getting a nominal wage that increases from, a little under 4. Like that, right? And it kind of is capped out around somewhere between 18 and 20 right now. Production workers on average. I don't know if this is the average of the median. But then when we adjust that for the actual inflation, what they've actually been making since the 1970s, gone down to nowhere. So, there are people that will boycott the Federal Reserve's annual meetings, and specifically citing like this graph and the fact that productivity, this graph alongside, and I'll find the podcast and send that to you guys. This graph alongside a graph talking about productivity and how productivity's grown, but real wages haven't grown at all. So where's all that extra money going to? All that extra value, all that extra profit, right? It's going to the corporation. So some of the time, and you might hear, your grandparents talk about this, or if you know anybody in the military or have family in the military, you might know about this, right? There's something called indexing. Indexing, not Windexing. Index. What is this indexing? So this is talking about it's when we increase a nominal amount each period by the percentage of a specific index. And so, indexing, it's an automatic adjustment. So, if the prices increase 3% in any given year, then Social Security recipients, all of our grandparents, and my parents, because I've got old parents, Social Security recipients receive 3% more. Right? This doesn't need, there's no needed action by Congress or any other of the buffoons in Washington, right? Thank goodness. Sometimes we see indexing in labor contracts. I was talking about, military stuff, right? They'll usually be indexing there in terms of cost of living, indexing increases, right? Indexing occurs in labor contracts. And no more serious labor contract than the military, right? So let's talk about what that would look like, right? So indexed labor contract, and we'll talk about the minimum wage, and then we'll get out of here. So, sorry, I'll let you guys finish. So let's do an example here. All right. Okay. So let's say that we have an indexed labor contract. So it tells us that the first year we're going to get $12 an hour. And then the wages rise by 2% for the next 2 years. And so when we're doing something like this, we have a relative price index, right? So we're gonna, I don't know if you guys remember this, but remember like let X equal. So we're gonna say like let the first year be the price index. So be the price index base. And so it's going to have, the price index of 1, right? So for the first year, let's go ahead and like with everything else, it's best to make a little table. So year 1, 2, 3. We've got real wage. We've got the price index, and we've got the nominal wage. I'm just going to call that the wage. If you just see stuff that just says wage without real or without that little R in before it, it's assumed by default it's nominal. Okay, so that's kind of helpful to know as you're wading through the internet. So we're told that the wage starts at $12 first year. We have a price index. The first year we're going to say it's 1.00. It's all the information that we were given. The real wage in this first year, right? We're going to take the wage, we're going to divide it by the price index of 12, divided by 1 is equal to 12. Cool. And then we're going to go ahead and figure out that in the next year, we're given this information as well too. Keep to this column. We're given 1.05 and we're given 1.10. So we're given some information about the macroeconomic landscape, right? We're told that inflation is 5% a year. And so essentially we want to know, are we actually getting real wage increases, right? Because this nominal wage increase here is going to be, so the first one is going to be what? 12 times 1.02, right? Increasing by 2%, so we can just do 12 times 1.02, and that ends up giving us 12.85. And then we do a similar thing, we do 12.85 times 1.02, and that's going to give us 13.73. Oh, much erase. And so we're going to take these nominal values, we're going to divide them by the price index to get that real wage. So this is going to be 12.85 divided by 1.05 gives us what? 12.24. Similarly, we're going to do 13.73. We're going to divide that by 1.10, and that's going to give us $12.48 per hour. So yes, our real wage is increasing, but not by a lot, right? So we would say that inflation is eating away at or eroding any sort of wage gains that you may be experiencing. Any sort of nominal wage gains you may be experiencing is eroded by this increase in the price level. last thing, and then we'll wrap it up for today. Just quickly talk about minimum wage. And so the minimum wage, some of you may or may not be familiar with it, right? A lot of you, may have only worked on, your family's ranch or farm. But the minimum wage is a congressionally mandated, right? So Congress sets the national minimum wage, and this is set in nominal terms. So indexing it, there's a lot of debate, right? It would be simpler, less controversial. But essentially, it would also involve politicians, giving up some power, right? So politicians seem to benefit from the debate. So they like the fact that they're part of it and they get to debate back and forth, and they get to say, well, I increased minimum wage, and the other side gets to say, well, I didn't increase the nanny state and help, increase the pay for people that are cleaning toilets that shouldn't be getting more than $2 an hour or whatever the heck they think, right? We get periodic increases as a result. Publicized debates. Will deliver us some periodic increases. So the minimum wage has increased 15 times between the period of 1970 and 2008. And what do you guys think happened to the real minimum wage? Yeah, went down. Decreased by a third. Screw those poor people. They got to pick them up by their bootstraps. So our real minimum wage is decreased despite these periodic increases. Okay, so we'll pick up in class on Friday and talk about specifically about kind of CPI and inflation and the flaws, right? So what are the flaws in the CPI and kind of in the policy decisions that Congress makes as a result? So stay tuned for more on Friday.
Friday, I won't be able to make it to class. I've got to be up with this class in Cheyenne.
I will throw it up on the YouTube and put it out.
Okay, thank you.